And we begin with the United States on the verge of military action in Syria. Today, President Obama gave a speech at the Lincoln Memorial to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. But more pressing on his mind is how the United States and allies will react to an alleged chemical strike in war-torn Syria. The UN's special envoy to Syria acknowledged that some kind of chemical substance was used last week outside Damascus, claiming the lives of more than 1,000 people. And NATO called the attack a clear breach of international norms. President Obama is reaching out to allies in planning for a round of military strikes against selected targets of the Assad regime. The White House stressed on Tuesday that the goal of the strikes is not to remove Assad from power, but instead to punish his government for carrying out the attacks. But President Obama is unlikely to find any support in the Arab world for military strikes against Syria. The Arab League, though it blames the Syrian government for the chemical attack and has already expelled President al-Assad, won't endorse military action in retaliation. And here in the United States, Congress wants to have a say before any military action is taken. 22 members of the House of Representatives have written a letter to the White House demanding Congress approval of any military strike. Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California said, "While the use of chemical weapons is deeply troubling and unacceptable, I believe there's no military solution to the complex Syrian crisis." Now, the harshest words against U.S. intervention came from former U.S. Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who said, "So what, we're about to become al-Qaeda's Air Force now? This is a very, very serious matter that has broad implications internationally, and to try to minimize it by saying we're just going to have a targeted strike, well, that's an act of war. It's not anything to be trifled with." Meanwhile, the UN Security Council received a draft from British Prime Minister David Cameron authorizing what he calls necessary measures to be taken in Syria. But such a resolution can't gain approval on the Security Council, given that both Russia and China have a veto and are both critical of military strikes in Syria. Now, for more on this, RT's Marina Portnaya joins me from New York. Marina, welcome.
Hi, Sam.
What exactly did David Cameron's resolution call for?
Well, the text of the UK's draft resolution reportedly condemns the August 21st alleged chemical weapons attack on rebel-held areas in Syria. It faults the Syrian government for the alleged attack. And this draft resolution also seeks Council authorization, as you mentioned, for all necessary measures to be used to protect Syrian civilians from chemical weapons.
Is it fair to assume that by necessary measures he means targeted military strikes?
It's very fair to assume that all necessary measures under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter allows for the use of force to be used. The same wording was used in the Security Council resolution that was adopted and subsequently paved way for the US, the UK, and France to launch a military intervention into Libya. So yes, of course, it's fair to assume that if the Security Council were to adopt a resolution that allows for all necessary measures to be used in the case of Syria, then we would see a military intervention that would have a stamp of approval from the international community.
So the UK brings this draft to the Security Council. What happened?
Well, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council failed to reach a consensus, failed to reach an agreement. We have the U.S., the U.K., France, Russia, and China. The U.S. and France, of course, support the U.K.'s draft resolution. Russia and China are not certain that the Syrian government has used chemical weapons and have warned about jumping to conclusions. Russia has publicly stated that the Council should wait for the report of weapons inspectors, the report from weapons inspectors that are in Damascus right now, before discussing any resolution on Syria. Now, the U.S., of course, is claiming to have evidence that it promises to share in the coming days. It's important to note, though, that the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has also said that the UN team needed to be given more time to establish the facts of the alleged chemical weapons attack. And also at a press conference in Geneva, the Joint Special Envoy to Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, also said that any military strike in response to the use of chemical weapons in Syria needed Security Council approval.
Well, it doesn't look like they're going to get that Security Council approval. So, I mean, does the U.S. go it alone on this? We have a U.S. representative said that we're past the point of no return here. That seems to suggest that that an attack is imminent, if anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems as though the U.S. has made up its mind. The U.S. and its European partners, France and Britain, they have a plan in place. This might have just been a protocol to make an attempt to go through the legal norms, because if they act outside of the United Nations and act unilaterally, it is a violation of international law. I don't know if they want to acknowledge it or not, but if they do strike militarily without approval from the Security Council, it's a violation of the UN Charter. But it seems as though that is the path they are choosing to go with anyway.
Now, you mentioned there's weapons inspectors in Syria right now investigating this alleged attack near Damascus. What's the time frame there? Do they still have more work to do? Is it feasible that the United States and allies would begin launching strikes against Syria while weapons inspectors are currently on the ground there?
I don't think that's the ideal plan. There have been reports that the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has asked the U.S. please wait until we get the investigators out of the area. I don't know what has been decided behind closed doors. I do know that this investigation is ongoing because UN officials have asked for the U.S. to be cautious, to not make any moves until a conclusion has been reached by people that are there, that are on the ground, that are taking samples from the soil, that are gathering testimony from the Syrians there. But it's not clear if the U.S. and its European allies are going to dismiss what everyone's saying and just strike whenever they want to. There's been reports that this strike can happen within 24 hours. Maybe it will happen over the weekend. We don't know. But if you judge by the words, the aggressive words and the tone that is being put forth by the U.S. and Europeans, it seems that this strike, as you said, is imminent.
That was RT correspondent Marina Portnaya.